What would you do if danger roared up behind you on a lonely desert highway, its headlights glowing like the eyes of a predator in the night? At the first blush of dawn, Sarah Bennett fired up the engine of her Kenworth T680, its deep growl reverberating through the desolate parking lot of a truck stop in Yuma, Arizona. She caught a glimpse of her weary hazel eyes in the side mirror, faint crow's feet etched at the corners, a testament to years of hard miles, and noticed the streaks of gray weaving through her cropped auburn hair, each strand a silent marker of battles fought far from home. "Another 900 miles to Houston," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rumble of the engine, as she tucked away receipts from her oatmeal and black coffee into her expense log, her fingers trembling slightly from the early morning chill. Sarah had honed a meticulous routine over her 4 years as an independent trucker, a rhythm born from her days commanding Humvees in the 2nd Armored Division at Fort Bliss, Texas. 2 deployments in Syria and 1 in Yemen had seared into her the value of vigilance. Every detail mattered, every moment a potential turning point between survival and disaster. She ran through her checklist with the precision of a soldier. Oil levels, tire pressure, and the $2.5 million load of medical equipment secured in the trailer, each piece a lifeline for someone waiting in Houston. The CB radio hissed to life, and a gravelly voice broke through the static. "Morning, Phoenix," said a fellow trucker, known to her as Iron Wolf, his tone warm but edged with caution. "How's the desert treating you today?" Sarah grinned at her road name, a nod to her fiery resilience, a name earned through grit and survival. "Clear skies, open road, Iron Wolf. I'm rolling out of Yuma, Houston bound. Heard whispers of hijackings on Interstate 10, stay sharp." "Always do," she replied, easing the truck onto the highway, the asphalt stretching out before her like a ribbon of promise and peril. Her mind wandered to her childhood in Marquette, Michigan, where her father still tended to the same red brick house by the lake, its walls holding memories of snowball fights and warm cocoa on winter nights. At 19, she'd enlisted, craving a life beyond the snow-dusted pines, a world where she could test her mettle. The military gave her discipline and grit, but it also fractured her marriage to Daniel, who couldn't bear the distance of her deployments, and left scars, both on her skin, from shrapnel that tore through her leg in Yemen, and in her soul, where the echoes of fallen comrades still lingered. Now, on the open road, Sarah sought solace in the solitude, each mile a chance to outrun the ghosts of her past. Imagine you're Sarah, cruising through the desert with a valuable cargo, the weight of the world on your shoulders. You spot a suspicious vehicle trailing you, its presence a dark omen in the morning light. Do you speed up and try to lose them, risking a dangerous chase? Or do you radio for help and keep your cool, hoping backup arrives in time? Drop your choice, 1 or 2, in the comments below. And please, help us reach 1,000 subscribers on the daily Narrated Stories channel. We're so close, and your support means the world to us, bringing more tales of courage and redemption to life. At 1:30 p.m., Sarah pulled into a quaint diner in Deming, New Mexico, the faint hum of Interstate 10 fading as she parked her rig, the crunch of gravel under her tires a familiar comfort. The diner's neon sign flickered with a promise of strong coffee and warm meals, its red glow casting a faint warmth against the cracked pavement, a beacon of normalcy in the vast desert. She stepped out, the dry desert air hitting her like a wave, carrying the scent of sagebrush and diesel, a mix that reminded her of long patrols in Syria. Inside, the jukebox played a mournful country tune, its notes weaving through the clatter of dishes and the low murmur of truckers swapping stories, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension brewing in Sarah's chest. "The usual, Sarah?" asked Millie, a seasoned waitress with a kind smile, her apron stained with years of serving weary travelers, her graying bun slightly askew from the lunch rush, her eyes crinkling with warmth. "Yes, and extra coffee. I've got miles to burn," Sarah replied, settling into a cracked vinyl booth near the window, her eyes scanning the room with practiced precision, a habit born from years of survival. It was second nature, a ritual forged in the chaos of Aleppo. Know your surroundings, locate the exits, keep your back to the wall. The diner's walls were plastered with faded photos of Route 66 landmarks, their edges curling with age, and a ceiling fan spun lazily overhead, stirring the warm air with a soft hum. Sarah's gaze landed on three men at a far table, their polished leather jackets and flashy watches starkly out of place among the flannel-clad truckers, their presence a jarring note in the familiar melody of the diner. They sat hunched over their coffee, their conversation a low, tense whisper, their eyes darting toward her every few seconds, their scrutiny a weight she could feel on her skin. One of them, a wiry man with a scar slicing across his cheek, tapped his fingers rhythmically on the table, the glint of a gold ring catching the light, a restless energy in his movements. The tallest of the three, with a salt and pepper beard, leaned in, his posture predatory, like a hawk eyeing its prey, his eyes cold and calculating. A chill ran down Sarah's spine, a primal warning she couldn't ignore, her instincts screaming that these men were trouble. Who are these guys? They don't belong here. Are they watching me, or my rig? She took a slow sip of her coffee, the bitter warmth grounding her, but her mind churned with suspicion, a storm of questions brewing beneath her calm exterior. She remembered a briefing in Syria, her commanding officer's voice sharp in her memory. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. The fries on her plate were crisp, the tang of ketchup a fleeting comfort. But her appetite waned as the men's glances grew bolder, their intent unmistakable. She noticed the scar-faced man slip a hand under his jacket, as if adjusting something heavy, a weapon, perhaps. The movement subtle but deliberate, a silent threat that sent her heart rate spiking. Her palms grew clammy, the napkin in her hand crumpling as she fought to maintain her composure. Don't let them know you're onto them. Stay in control. She paid her bill, leaving a generous tip for Millie, whose warm smile felt like a small anchor in the rising storm of her thoughts, a reminder of the kindness that still existed in the world. Stepping outside, the afternoon sun was relentless, the heat shimmering off the asphalt in waves, creating a mirage that distorted the horizon like a fever dream, the air thick with the promise of trouble. Back in her truck, Sarah cranked the AC, the cool air a sharp contrast to the sweat beading on her forehead, her breath shallow as she tried to shake the unease that clung to her like a shadow. She hit the road, the endless desert unfolding before her, golden sand dunes stretching to the horizon, dotted with scraggly mesquite trees, their shadows long and jagged under the blazing sun, a landscape both beautiful and unforgiving. The scenery was a stark contrast to the cramped, dust-choked streets of Sana'a, where every shadow hid a threat, every alley a potential ambush, the memory of that city a visceral weight in her chest. She could still hear the echoes of Sana'a, the wail of sirens, the shouts of her squad, the acrid smell of smoke after an IED detonated too close to her Humvee, the heat of the blast searing her skin. She shook off the memory, focusing on the hum of her engine, the steady rhythm a lifeline, but the unease from the diner lingered, a weight in her chest she couldn't shake, a dark cloud on the horizon of her mind. For hours later, the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, the colors bleeding together like a watercolor painting as Sarah pulled into a rest area just past Van Horn, Texas, to stretch her legs and freshen up. The lot buzzed with a handful of rigs, their drivers catching a few hours of sleep under the fading light, their snores a soft counterpoint to the distant hum of the highway. A lone hawk circled overhead, its cry piercing the stillness, a haunting sound that echoed Sarah's own restlessness, and the air carried the faint scent of creosote from the surrounding brush, a sharp, earthy note that grounded her. Sarah walked toward the restroom, her boots crunching on the gravel, her senses on high alert, the weight of her Beretta in its holster a reassuring presence at her side. She splashed cold water on her face, the shock of it pulling her back to the present, the mirror reflecting her tired eyes, the lines around them deeper now, etched by years of vigilance and loss. But as she returned to her truck, her heart skipped a beat, a jolt of adrenaline coursing through her veins. A sleek black SUV idled near her Kenworth, its tinted windows reflecting the last rays of sunlight like dark, unblinking eyes, a silent threat in the twilight. The same three men from the diner were circling her rig, their movements too deliberate to be casual, their presence a violation of the sanctuary she'd carved out on the road. The scar-faced man ran a hand along the trailer's lock, his fingers lingering as if testing its strength, his movements slow and deliberate, a predator assessing its prey. The salt and pepper-bearded man stood back, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the cab where Sarah's belongings sat exposed. A photo of her father taped to the dashboard, a worn paperback she'd been reading, small pieces of her life laid bare. The third man, younger, with a buzz cut and a restless energy, kept glancing around the lot, his hand hovering near his waistband, his posture tense, ready to bolt or fight. Sarah's pulse quickened, her mind flashing to a night in Syria, an ambush on a moonless night. The crack of gunfire, the scream of her comrade, Private Torres, as he fell, blood pooling beneath him, his eyes wide with shock and fear. She could still feel the weight of his body as she dragged him to safety, her hands slick with his blood, her ears ringing with the chaos of war, the guilt of his death a permanent scar on her soul. Not now, Sarah. Focus. She shook off the memory, steadying her breath, her training kicking in like muscle memory, a shield against the rising panic. She squared her shoulders, her voice calm but firm as she called out, "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Her keys were gripped tightly in her palm, the metal biting into her skin, a lifeline to her rig, a reminder of the control she still held. The tallest man, the one with the salt and pepper beard, turned with a calculated smile, his eyes cold and assessing, like a predator sizing up prey, a glint of malice in their depths. "Just admiring your rig, ma'am. A fine Kenworth," he said, his voice smooth as oil, but there was an edge to it, a veiled threat that made the hairs on Sarah's neck stand on end. She noticed a faint tattoo peeking out from his sleeve, a coiled snake, its fangs bared, a symbol she'd seen on wanted posters at truck stops, linked to a string of cargo thefts, a silent confirmation of her worst fears. "Thanks," Sarah replied, keeping her distance, her body angled toward the cab, ready to move if needed, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm in her chest. "I need to get moving." "Safe travels," he said, stepping back, but his smile didn't reach his eyes, and the air crackled with unspoken menace, a silent promise of trouble to come, a storm brewing on the horizon. Sarah climbed into her cab, her hands trembling slightly as she locked the doors and checked her security system. The beep of the alarm a small comfort in the growing tension, a lifeline in the chaos. She started the engine, the familiar rumble grounding her, but her eyes darted to her mirrors, her breath catching as she saw the black SUV pull out behind her, keeping a steady distance, its headlights a pair of glowing eyes in the dusk, trailing her like a shadow she couldn't shake. For the next hour, they followed, never too close but always there, a constant reminder of the danger lurking just out of reach, a dark specter on the edge of her vision. Sarah's mind raced, questions piling up like storm clouds, each one heavier than the last. What do they want? The cargo? Or something more personal? She thought of her father back in Marquette, his proud smile when she'd bought her first rig, his voice on the phone last week, trembling with worry. "Be careful out there, kiddo. The road's no place for a lone wolf." She'd laughed it off then, her independence a badge of honor, but now his words felt like a prophecy, a warning she couldn't ignore. She grabbed her radio, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach, the fear that gnawed at her edges. "Iron Wolf, this is Phoenix, do you copy?" Static crackled, then Nathan's voice came through, warm and reassuring, a lifeline in the darkness. "Copy, Phoenix. You okay? I've got a tail. Black SUV, 3 men. Been on me since Van Horn," she said, her words clipped, her focus split between the road and the mirrors, her hands gripping the wheel like a lifeline. "Got it. I'm 25 minutes ahead, eastbound on I-10 past Balmore. I'll wait at the next rest area," Nathan replied, his tone shifting to one of concern, his words a promise of safety in the storm. Sarah exhaled, a flicker of relief cutting through the tension, but the weight of the situation pressed down on her, a heavy burden she couldn't shake. Even with backup on the horizon, she knew she couldn't let her guard down, the lessons of war too deeply ingrained to ignore. She reached under her seat, her fingers brushing the cool metal of her registered Beretta 92 FS, a precaution she'd insisted on since going independent, a silent vow to never be defenseless again. She checked the magazine, the click of the bullets a grim reminder of the stakes, and slid it back into its holster, her resolve hardening, a fire igniting in her chest. The SUV maintained its distance, but Sarah's gut told her they were biding their time, waiting for a desolate stretch of road where the desert swallowed sound and witnesses were scarce, a perfect hunting ground for predators. She glanced at the dashboard clock, 6:45 p.m., the sky now a deep indigo, the first stars piercing through the darkness, their light cold and distant. The road ahead was a ribbon of black, flanked by endless sand and the occasional silhouette of a Joshua tree, its twisted branches like skeletal hands reaching for the sky, a haunting image that mirrored the fear in her heart. Her thoughts drifted to her last tour in Yemen, a night patrol gone wrong, the sudden flash of an RPG, the searing pain in her leg as shrapnel tore through muscle, the screams of her squad as they scattered for cover. She'd crawled to cover, her squad pinned down, the taste of blood and sand in her mouth as she radioed for evac, her voice steady despite the chaos, her training the only thing keeping her alive. I survived that. I'll survive this. The memory fueled her, a reminder of her resilience. But it also brought a wave of guilt, survivor's guilt, the therapist had called it, for the ones she couldn't save, like Torres, whose laughter still echoed in her dreams, a haunting melody she couldn't escape. Her fears materialized in a construction zone, traffic squeezed into one lane, orange cones glowing under her headlights, their reflective strips a stark contrast to the darkness. The SUV surged forward, its engine roaring as it pulled alongside her truck, the passenger window rolling down with a mechanical whine, a sound that sent a shiver down her spine. Sarah's breath caught as she saw the glint of a gun barrel, its muzzle aimed directly at her, the metal catching the faint light of the moon, a deadly promise in its gleam. "Pull over now," the man barked, his voice sharp with menace, his face half-shadowed, but his eyes burning with intent, a cold fury that chilled her to the bone. Sarah's heart pounded, a drumbeat in her chest, but she kept her face impassive, her mind racing through options, each one a gamble with her life. The rest area was still 10 minutes away, and no other trucks were in sight. The road a lonely stretch of asphalt under the starlit sky, a battlefield with no allies in sight. Her Kenworth was her weapon. She knew its limits better than they did. Every gear shift, every quirk of its handling etched into her muscle memory from countless miles, a trusted companion in the fight for survival. She slammed the accelerator, the truck lurching forward with a roar, kicking up dust as the speedometer climbed, the needle trembling at 70 miles per hour, the engine's growl a defiant cry in the night. The SUV matched her speed, the gun still trained on her, its driver weaving dangerously close, trying to force her off the road, the screech of tires a piercing scream in the darkness. Sarah's hands tightened on the wheel, her knuckles white, as she weighed her next move, her mind a battlefield of fear and strategy. She waited until they were parallel again, the SUV's headlights blinding in her peripheral vision, a harsh glare that mirrored the intensity of her focus. Then, she executed a maneuver drilled into her during military training, a tactic that had saved her life in Yemen. She braked hard to the right, as if dodging debris, the sudden shift sending a jolt through the rig, the trailer swaying slightly as she corrected her course, her hands steady despite the chaos. To the untrained eye, it looked like a panicked swerve, but to her pursuers, it was a calculated challenge, a dare they couldn't ignore. The SUV veered into the right lane, its tires screeching, and when its driver overcorrected, it skidded toward the shoulder, kicking up a cloud of gravel that glittered in her taillights like a swarm of fireflies, a fleeting beauty in the midst of danger. Sarah used the moment to pull ahead, her heavy rig steady while the SUV struggled to recover, its headlights dipping as it fishtailed, a wounded beast in the night. She needed witnesses, a crowd, safety in numbers, a lesson learned in the chaos of war. Her GPS showed a rest area 4 miles out, a beacon of hope on the glowing screen, a light at the end of a dark tunnel. The SUV regained control, now more aggressive, weaving dangerously close, its bumper nearly kissing her trailer, a deadly dance on the deserted highway. They pulled ahead, slowing to force her to stop, their brake lights a taunting red glow in the darkness, a challenge she couldn't ignore. Sarah's mind flashed to a training exercise at Fort Bliss, her instructor's voice echoing through the years. Use your vehicle's mass to your advantage. A rig like yours can push through where a car can't. She spotted the rest area exit, a faint outline in the distance, and made a split-second decision, her resolve hardening like steel. She blared her horn, a desperate cry for attention that echoed across the desert, a plea for help in the stillness, and swerved into the exit lane, the SUV nearly clipping her trailer as she barreled through. The smaller vehicle swerved, its driver braking hard to avoid a concrete barrier, the screech of tires a piercing scream in the night, a sound that echoed the fear in Sarah's heart. Sarah screeched into the lot, her brakes hissing as she parked between two rigs, their hulking shapes a protective barrier, a fortress in the chaos. She grabbed her radio, her voice breathless but steady, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Iron Wolf, I'm at the rest area. They're still here." She bolted toward the diner, her boots pounding the pavement, the cool night air biting at her lungs, her chest tight with the weight of survival. The diner's windows glowed with warm light, a haven amidst the chaos, a beacon of safety in the storm. She burst through the door, the bell above jangling wildly, a frantic note in the quiet night. The SUV rolled in behind her but stopped at a distance, its occupants hesitant as truckers turned to watch, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern, their presence a shield against the darkness. Inside, Sarah spotted Iron Wolf, real name Nathan Carter, a towering man with a grizzled beard and a flannel shirt, nursing a cup of coffee at a corner table, his broad shoulders a comforting sight. "Nathan," she shouted, her voice raw with adrenaline, the cut on her cheek stinging as sweat mingled with the blood, a sharp reminder of the danger she'd faced. "That SUV, they've been chasing me. They're armed." Nathan stood, his 6'5" frame commanding the room, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor, a sound that cut through the murmur of the diner. "Saw you come in like a bat out of hell. That them?" He nodded toward the window, where the three men lingered by their vehicle, their silhouettes tense and watchful, their intentions a dark mystery. "Yeah, they tried to force me off the road," Sarah said, her chest heaving, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, a fire that refused to be extinguished. She could still feel the weight of the gun's muzzle in her mind, the cold certainty of its threat, and the memory of Maria's death in Syria clawed at her. "I can't lose anyone else." Nathan waved over two other truckers, Gabe and Lucas, their faces hard with resolve, their boots heavy on the floor as they joined the huddle, a brotherhood forged on the road. Gabe, a wiry man with a faded Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm, cracked his knuckles, his eyes narrowing as he glanced outside, his military past evident in his stance. Lucas, broader and quieter, adjusted his cap, his jaw set with determination, his silence a quiet strength. A waitress, Clara, approached, her expression stern, her hands on her hips, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Want me to call the cops?" Sarah hesitated, her distrust of authority rooted in years of navigating military bureaucracy, the endless red tape that had delayed her medical discharge, the skeptical officers who dismissed her reports of PTSD as just stress. But she nodded, knowing she had no choice, the weight of the moment too heavy to bear alone. "Yes, tell them it's an attempted armed robbery." The diner buzzed with activity as Clara dialed 911, the truckers murmuring among themselves, their camaraderie a lifeline in the chaos, a reminder that she wasn't alone. The men in the SUV sped off as the call went through, their taillights disappearing into the night, a fleeting escape that left Sarah's heart racing. Nathan jotted down their license plate, his pen scratching against a napkin, his movements quick and precise. "Likely stolen, but worth a shot," he muttered, his voice gruff but reassuring, a promise of action in the uncertainty. 20 minutes later, Officer David Harper arrived, his weathered face etched with experience, his uniform crisp despite the late hour, a symbol of order in the chaos. He carried a notebook, his pen poised as he listened to Sarah's account, his gray eyes sharp but skeptical, a look that stirred old resentments in her heart. "You're sure they were armed, Miss Bennett?" he asked, his tone measured, almost doubting, his brow furrowing as he scribbled a note. Sarah's jaw tightened, memories of a commanding officer in Yemen questioning her decisions flooding back, the same officer who'd sent her squad into that doomed patrol, the one that cost Maria her life, a wound that still bled in her soul. "I saw the gun clear as day," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach, the anger simmering beneath her calm exterior, a fire that refused to be quenched. And you sped up? Harper's tone held a hint of judgment, his words a spark to her smoldering frustration. Sarah's fists clenched under the table, her nails digging into her palms, the pain grounding her as she fought the urge to snap, her patience fraying at the edges. I spent 9 years in the Army, sir, 3 tours in combat zones. I've driven through IED-laced roads. I know a threat when I see one. Harper's eyes widened, his skepticism giving way to surprise, a shift that softened the tension between them. Which unit? He asked, his tone softening, a flicker of respect in his gaze. 2nd Armored Division, Fort Bliss. Discharged as a staff sergeant in 2021, Sarah replied, her voice firm, the pride of her service a shield against his doubt, a badge of honor she wore with every scar. Harper's expression shifted, a flicker of respect crossing his face, a bridge between them. My daughter's in the 3rd Armored. Same base. The dynamic changed, his questions becoming more detailed, his tone more collaborative as he promised to alert patrols, noting recent cargo thefts along the route, a pattern that confirmed Sarah's instincts. Don't travel alone, he advised, glancing at Nathan and the other truckers, who stood like sentinels around Sarah, their presence a wall against the darkness. We're all Houston-bound, Nathan said, his voice a deep rumble, a promise of protection. Phoenix won't be alone. Sarah felt a flicker of warmth, unaccustomed to relying on others, her years on the road a solitary dance with her demons, a journey of self-imposed isolation. They formed a convoy, Sarah's truck in the middle, radios crackling with their plan. Stay tight. Report anything suspicious. No one gets left behind. A pact forged in the heat of danger. They set off with a police escort to the county line, the cruiser's lights a comforting beacon in the darkness, a guiding star in the night. Nathan's words lingered as they pulled onto the highway. You're not alone, Sarah. We look out for our own. The night was quiet, the stars a glittering canopy above, their light a cold comfort. But Sarah remained vigilant, her military instincts on high alert, her eyes scanning the mirrors for any sign of the SUV, her mind a battlefield of fear and resolve. She thought of her father again, his voice a whisper in her mind. You're stronger than you know, kiddo. She clung to that, a lifeline in the uncertainty of the road, a beacon of hope in the darkness. At the Texas border, they paused for a rest, the convoy pulling into a truck stop lit by harsh fluorescent lights, the air thick with the smell of diesel and fried food, a gritty reality that grounded her. Sarah stepped out, stretching her aching limbs, the cut on her cheek now a dull ache, the blood crusted over, a badge of survival. She refused to swap drivers despite her fatigue, her stubborn independence a double-edged sword, a strength and a vulnerability intertwined. She splashed water on her face in the restroom, the cold shock pulling her back to the present, the mirror reflecting her weary eyes, the weight of the day etched into every line. She checked her phone, 3 missed calls from her father, a voicemail she didn't have the heart to listen to yet, the thought of his worry a weight she couldn't bear. Not now, Dad. I need to finish this. She rejoined the convoy, the other truckers offering her nods of respect, their silent support a balm to her frayed nerves, a reminder of the community she'd found on the road. Halfway to Houston, Nathan's voice crackled over the radio, sharp with urgency, a jolt that snapped Sarah back to the present. Phoenix, I've got lights closing in fast. Looks like that SUV. Sarah's grip tightened on the wheel, her mirrors confirming the threat, the black SUV's headlights growing larger, a menacing glow in the darkness, a predator returning for its prey. I see them, she replied, her voice steady but her heart racing, the adrenaline surging back like a tidal wave, a rush that drowned out her fear. They've got a rifle now. I'm going evasive. She braked sharply, swerving left, then right, the SUV overshooting her position, its driver caught off guard, the maneuver a desperate bid for survival. A shot rang out, shattering her side window, glass slicing her cheek anew, the sting sharp and immediate, a fresh wound in the battle. Blood trickled down her face, warm and sticky, but she held steady, her training kicking in, her focus narrowing to a pinpoint, a warrior in the heat of battle. Not today, not like this. Nathan maneuvered his rig alongside the SUV, forcing it toward the shoulder, his horn blaring a warning that echoed through the night, a defiant cry in the darkness. Sarah accelerated, the other truckers forming a protective barrier around her, their rigs a moving fortress against the threat, a brotherhood in motion. Her GPS showed Pecos, Texas, 12 miles away. The attackers' desperation was palpable, their movements erratic as they tried to break through the convoy, a pack of wolves testing the herd. The SUV found a gap, pulling beside her cab, the rifleman shouting, "Stop, or I'll blow your head off." Sarah's heart raced, memories of a Syrian checkpoint ambush flooding back. The screams, the blood, the loss of her best friend, Maria, whose laughter had once filled their barracks with light, a sound that now haunted her dreams. She could still hear Maria's voice, teasing her about her terrible coffee-making skills, a memory so vivid it brought tears to her eyes, blurring her vision for a moment of vulnerability in the storm. "I can't lose anyone else. I won't." She swerved, dodging another shot that grazed her seat, the bullet embedding itself in the dashboard with a sickening thunk, a near miss that sent her hard into her throat. Seizing the momentary confusion, Sarah executed a daring maneuver, her hands steady despite the fear clawing at her chest, a fire burning in her veins. She abruptly turned the wheel toward the SUV, the side of her heavy truck striking the smaller vehicle with a bone-rattling crunch, forcing it off the road, a desperate act of defiance. The SUV skidded onto the shoulder, its tires spinning uselessly in the sand, then flipped violently, dust and debris exploding into the air as it rolled, metal screeching against metal, a cacophony of destruction in the night. It came to rest upside down in a crumpled heap, a broken beast in the moonlight, its threat extinguished. Sarah braked hard, her chest heaving, her breaths coming in ragged gasps as the other drivers pulled over, their headlights illuminating the wreckage in stark relief, a scene of chaos and survival. Nathan was the first to reach her, his boots crunching on the gravel as he ran to her side, his eyes wide with concern, his voice thick with worry. "Are you okay?" he asked, his hand reaching out but stopping short, as if afraid to touch her, his fear for her palpable. Sarah touched her cheek, blood smearing her fingers, the pain a distant echo compared to the storm in her mind, the weight of survival heavy on her shoulders. "I'm fine," she said, her voice hollow, the weight of the moment crashing over her like a wave, a tsunami of emotion she couldn't contain. "We need to check on them and call the police." They approached the wreckage cautiously, the air thick with the smell of gasoline and scorched rubber, the SUV a mangled mess of twisted metal and shattered glass, a testament to the violence of the night. Two men lay motionless on the ground, ejected during the crash, their bodies crumpled like broken dolls, their lives snuffed out in an instant. The third, the man with the salt and pepper beard, was pinned in the driver's seat, groaning in pain, his face bloodied, his eyes flickering with a mix of anger and fear, a defeated predator in the wreckage. Gabe, a former EMT, checked the others, his movements swift and practiced, his face grim as he knelt beside the first body, his hands steady despite the horror. "This one's gone," he said, gesturing to the scar-faced man, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle, his gold ring glinting dully in the headlights, a hollow trophy in death. "The other's critical," he added, pointing to the younger man, whose chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged breaths, blood pooling beneath him, a life hanging by a thread. Sarah faced the trapped man, her boots crunching on broken glass as she approached, her Beretta still holstered but her hand hovering near it, ready to draw if needed, her instincts still on high alert. He glared at her, his eyes burning with defiance despite his predicament, a wounded animal refusing to surrender. "You're insane," he rasped, blood staining his lips, his voice a weak growl, his strength fading. "I'm a veteran," Sarah replied, her voice cold, her hazel eyes hard as steel, a warrior unbroken. "What did you think would happen when you attacked a convoy?" The man coughed, a wet, rattling sound, his face contorting in pain, his body betraying his defiance. "The load. It's worth millions," he managed, his voice fading as he struggled to stay conscious, his head lolling against the shattered window, a final confession in the night. Sarah stepped back, her chest tight with a mix of relief and dread. The weight of his words a confirmation of her fears, the stakes higher than she'd imagined. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second, a promise of justice in the chaos. Police cars and ambulances arrived, their lights flashing red and blue, casting eerie shadows across the scene, a dance of light and shadow in the desert night. Sheriff James Carter, a broad-shouldered man with a no-nonsense demeanor, listened to their accounts, his deputies collecting evidence. Bullet casings from Sarah's cab, tire marks on the shoulder, a discarded rifle magazine near the wreckage, pieces of a puzzle that told a story of survival. This was self-defense, he concluded, his voice firm, his eyes meeting Sarah's with a nod of respect, a recognition of her courage. The surviving man, identified as Victor Ramsey, a disgraced ex-cop with a history of corruption, confessed they'd been tipped off about Sarah's load by a shipping insider, a betrayal that stung Sarah more than the cut on her cheek, a reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows. The other two, career criminals named Ethan Cole and Marcus Lane, didn't survive, their deaths a grim reminder of the stakes Sarah had faced, a heavy toll in the fight for survival. She gave her statement, her voice steady but her hands trembling as she recounted the chase, the gunfire, the crash. Each word a weight lifted from her shoulders. Nathan insisted on a hospital visit, his concern etched into the lines of his face, his voice soft with worry, but Sarah refused, her stubbornness a shield against her vulnerability, a wall she'd built over years of solitude. "I've had worse," she said, her voice hollow, the weight of the day crashing over her like a wave, the memories of Syria and Yemen swirling in her mind, a storm she couldn't outrun. The convoy reached Houston without further incident, the city's skyline a welcome sight as dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, a new beginning after the darkness. Sarah delivered her cargo on time. The client, a harried warehouse manager named Elena, praising her grit, her eyes wide with admiration as she signed the paperwork, her voice soft with awe. "Heard what happened on the radio," Elena said, her tone gentle, her respect evident. "You're a hero." Sarah shook her head, uncomfortable with the label, but the words lingered, a small spark of pride amidst the exhaustion, a light in the darkness. Word of her stand against the robbers spread like wildfire across trucker channels, and a small crowd of drivers greeted her as Phoenix, the warrior who'd fought off armed thieves, their cheers a chorus of respect that warmed her despite her fatigue, a community embracing her as one of their own. Exhausted, Sarah parked her rig in the client's lot, the adrenaline finally ebbing, leaving her hollow but alive, a survivor in the aftermath. Nathan approached, his expression soft, his eyes searching hers for signs of the storm within. "Where to now, Sarah?" he asked, his voice gentle, a friend offering solace. She paused, the day's events swirling in her mind. Gunfire, shattered glass, the faces of the men she'd stopped, each moment a scar on her memory. "I need time to think," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, the weight of her words heavy with emotion. Nathan nodded, understanding flickering in his gaze. "There's a gathering of the Lone Star Truckers Alliance here in Houston tomorrow. Come by. Folks want to meet you," he said, his tone encouraging, a hand extended in friendship. Sarah gave a small smile, promising to consider it, then drove to a quiet motel, the hum of the city fading into the background as she sought refuge. In her room, she stood under the scalding shower, the water washing away blood and dust, a cleansing ritual after the chaos. She closed her eyes, and the memories came unbidden. Maria's laughter in the barracks, a sound like sunlight on a cold day, her lifeless body after the ambush, the long months of physical therapy after a shrapnel wound tore through her leg, each scar a story of survival. Tears mingled with the water, not from fear, but from a deep, unshakable relief. She'd survived, and she'd protected others, a victory hard won in the face of darkness. The next day, despite her instinct to retreat, Sarah attended the Alliance meeting, her steps hesitant but resolute. She was met with a wave of respect, truckers shaking her hand, their eyes shining with admiration, their voices a chorus of gratitude. The president, Clara Evans, introduced her to the crowd, her voice strong with conviction. Sarah's courage didn't just save her cargo. It brought down a crew that's been preying on our community for months. She's a reminder of what we stand for: loyalty, bravery, and looking out for each other," Clara said, her words a balm to Sarah's wounded soul. Sarah shifted uncomfortably under the praise, but a warmth bloomed in her chest, a feeling she hadn't known since her army days: belonging. She wasn't alone anymore, the road no longer a solitary path. That night, in her motel room, Sarah sat on the bed, a cup of chamomile tea in her hands, the steam rising like a whisper of peace, and let her mind wander. She thought of the wide-eyed girl from Marquette who'd enlisted to find her place in the world, the comrades she'd lost, the pain of rebuilding herself after her injury, each memory a thread in the tapestry of her life. She'd spent years on the road, seeking solitude to quiet her demons, but now she saw her scars differently. They weren't just reminders of loss, but badges of survival, resilience, and the strength to protect others, a legacy of courage. 6 months later, Sarah still hauled cargo across the country, but she'd transformed, her journey no longer solitary. She'd launched a training program for truckers, teaching defensive driving and safety tactics, her students calling her Staff Sergeant Bennett, with quiet respect, a title that honored her past and her purpose. The Houston incident had become a legend, but Sarah cared only that her work was saving lives, each lesson a shield against the dangers she'd faced. One crisp fall evening, she parked her rig in Marquette, in front of her father's red brick house, the familiar sight a balm to her weary soul. He wrapped her in a bear hug, his eyes misty, his embrace a homecoming she'd longed for. "You're different, kiddo," he said, studying her face, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile, the first in years. "I am, Dad," she replied, her voice steady, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Sitting on the porch, the lake shimmering under the moonlight, its surface a mirror of her newfound peace, Sarah reflected on her journey. The highway had given her what the military couldn't, a community that saw her scars as strength, a purpose that turned her pain into protection for others. Her story was one of courage, of finding light in the darkest moments, a testament to the resilience we can all tap into when faced with the unthinkable, a beacon for others on their own journeys. What's a moment in your life where you turned fear into strength? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear how you've found your own redemption on the road of life, a connection that binds us all. Her journey inspired a song, its lyrics echoing her transformation, a melody of resilience and hope. 18 wheels beneath my feet, memories I can't escape. Desert roads stretch endlessly, like the wars I've faced. Scars that whisper a soldier's tale of battles I've endured. I'm finding peace in shattered places, a home on these roads. When the night closes in, I know I'm not alone. These wheels keep rolling. This heart keeps growing, turning my pain to steel. They thought she was weak, a lone woman on the road, but they didn't see the warrior within, the fire that burned brighter than their threats. I've learned to trust the path, to trust myself. I'm finding peace in shattered places, a home on these roads. These wheels keep rolling. This heart keeps growing, turning my pain to gold. The Daily Narrated Stories channel is proud to bring you tales like Sarah's, stories that inspire, uplift, and remind us of the courage within us all, a mission to light the way for others. Don't miss out. Subscribe now to Daily Narrated Stories and join our community of dreamers and fighters. We're racing to 1,000 subscribers, and your support can make it happen today. Hit that button, comment your thoughts, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Time's ticking. Be part of our journey now.